So today we have, I think, a really special session actually, because as I sat down and started putting together a presentation on, it's similar to the Design School Vision video that Penny and I created together for the beginning of the year. I found a similar kind of complexity to the Earth Regeneration Fund, and that I felt I needed to tell that story so that we could all see some of the patterns that are already flowing and how they're becoming more clear and how they relate to each other and how they relate to a lot of things happening in the design school and in the world of regeneration and the world of bioregionalism and the world larger than the design school. And this is one point I just want to start with before we go into our presentation today, is that it can be confusing working with me, and Penny knows this really well, because I get involved in creating lots of things that are then related to each other in lots of ways, and it's not usually obvious how they're related. So the question, is the Earth Regeneration Fund part of the design school? Is it part of Bioregional Earth? Is it something else? These are questions that actually, the answers will probably confuse you more than clarify things for you. Because really it's an ecosystemic weaving pattern that is happening with stories. And the stories feed into and support each other. And I work so emergently with this that it can actually create conflict and confusion and frustration. And this is something I've dealt with a lot in my life. But I want to just emphasize today that I'm focusing on the Earth Regeneration Fund as the Earth Regeneration Fund. And you will see that it relates to the design school. It relates to R 3.0. It relates to the global Earth repair convergence. It relates to Kinship Earth. It relates to specific bioregional efforts, and then etc. Just to say it's got its own life and its own focus. And what we need to do is understand what the Earth Regeneration Fund is so we can see how to work with it. And then as we see that, some of the things like the 4-part series that Steve Melville did in the end of last year about realizing the promise of the Earth Regeneration Fund, you would see what kinds of practical opportunities exist this year to create things that have real impact, where those pathways are real for us. And it's related to these different affiliations that I just mentioned. And so what I want to do today is spend probably about 20 minutes going through a presentation. And in this presentation, basically, you could think of it as like I'm setting the dinner table for a big smorgasbord of eating. So you think it's like I'm showing us what's on the table so that we can all see it together. And then in our discussion, some of you, in that metaphor, you get mixed into your part of the meal. So let's forget how dangerous metaphors are for a moment and say that some of you will see that you're a part of this. And then you might want to share some of the things like, oh, well, this is what R 3.0 is doing. This is what and now what is doing. This is what, so that you can add some of the context beyond what I've shared. And then we can explore together what kinds of workflows might we want to create in the design school to help these things happen so that we can be sure that we achieve the things that I'm going to lay out for us. And one thing that you'll see pretty quickly is I'm proposing multiple fundraising processes at the same time, which doesn't mean that one person or one group is fundraising for everything, but that you can start to see how the Earth Regeneration Fund as a set of stories is manifesting itself in different places and in diverse ways. So does that all make sense? Are there any questions before I do the presentation? I think the presentation will make all of this more clear. So cool. Then what I want to do now is just jump into the presentation. And here we go. So I always have to move these things to get to this guy. There we go. There we are. Move that back up here. And now, here we go. So today, we want to talk about the Earth Regeneration Fund in 2025. To be able to do that, I want to briefly name that this graphic represents the Earth Regeneration Fund in 2024, which is that back in September, we had a week-long gathering in the Greater Takaranto bioregion, co-hosted by the Design School and Legacy Project, where we officially birthed the Earth Regeneration Fund. And one of the things we did at the Design School was we brought $125,000 to 5 different bioregions. So $25,000 to Cascadia, 25,000 to the Ogallala, to Barichara, to the GTB, and to the Forest of the Northeast, to start investing in building their bioregional funding ecosystems. And each of those bioregional processes is unfolding with its own leadership and with its own sort of unique processes. And so that's already happening. And then in the Northern Andes, $150,000 went there back in July of last year, and processes are unfolding. But the important thing to know for our purposes is that the Earth Regeneration Fund is already alive as a collection of stories that are emerging in different landscapes. So each place is doing its own work. And I realize now that I need to stop sharing, give Penny co-hosting abilities so that she can mute people when I'm presenting, because there's background. Penny, where are you? Oh, there you are. So I'm going to make you co-host. There we go, because I heard some background noise. That'll be better. All right, so now jump back into the presentation. So, just to say that we've already started this process and it's already unfolding. And now what we want to do is talk about how the Earth Regeneration Fund, as I mentioned before, is a collection of stories and relationships. And that funding moves through it, but the funding is maybe the less interesting part. So this is the basic summary of what I want to talk about today. Is the Earth Regeneration Fund has already started by providing financial seed funds to 6 different bioregional contexts and getting them to relate to each other in ways that are just emerging and are not fully clear yet. And one of the things that we want to do in 2025 is structure new financial flows into bioregions. And we're going to talk about how this is happening through the Kinship Earth Flow Fund and how this is happening through the Global Earth Repair Foundation. So I'll come back and talk about those in this presentation, but one of the goals of the Earth Regeneration Fund is to actually mobilize money and to structure it in a way that it's able to support the regeneration of the Earth through Kinship Earth's flow funds and through the Global Earth Repair convergence and activities that are happening. And then also, the bioregions that are already doing this kind of work affiliated with the ER Fund and with the design school, we're inviting them to tell their stories about what they're doing through Bioregional Earth. So the Bioregional Earth website is a place, and we talked about this in the design school vision, that Bioregional Earth is going to be a place where we're going to tell stories about the Earth Regeneration Fund. And just as an example, I've already asked Sydney Griffith of Kinship Earth to write an article for Bioregional Earth that'll come out next month, explaining the bioregional flow funds that we're going to talk about today. So these stories will start to come out as stories of people living into their bioregions as part of the way the Earth Regeneration Fund grows. And then another thing is that the Earth Regeneration Fund is going to help get local teams started, to help bioregional organizing teams emerge. And this is going to happen through the learning journey, how to organize your bioregion, and through other parallel efforts that involve local organizing. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So what you can see is that the Earth Regeneration Fund in 2025 is going to structure and move funding into landscapes in different ways, invite those landscapes to tell their stories in ways that are mutually supportive to the processes between and across bioregions, and that we're going to leverage organizing patterns like the learning journey to help this to happen coherently throughout the year. And so the timeline basically looks like this, that for 2025, we're going to have, first of all, next week, Penny and I are going to the Greater Takaranto bioregion to work with Brian and Susan of the Legacy Project on strengthening their bioregional funding ecosystem. So there's work that's already happening in the GTB around a funding ecosystem. It's related to indigenous groups, to conservation authorities, to municipalities and land trusts and regenerative farms and local education initiatives and lots of things happening in the GTB. And so next week, Penny and I are going to go and participate in some strategy sessions and meetings and help to strengthen and catalyze the next steps of the funding system of the GTB. And then a month from now, Barichara is going to have its design immersion. And as of right now, about 30 members of the design school are planning to come to Barichara. Some of you on this call are planning to come to learn about bioregional regeneration in Barichara in real world experience, to visit our bioparque and to visit Ori Hindalagua and see reforestation and things like that. So we have these like on the ground activities that are happening in different bioregions. And then the learning journey between March and September, there'll be a 6-month rhythm of webinars and processes to support people to create immersions, to create their own local organizing. That's going to be happening through the design school. And starting in May, there are already 2 that I know of, one in New Hampshire and the other one in Cascadia in Washington State, that will be global Earth repair events. And I'll talk more about this in a moment. But to say local bioregional organizing around ecosystem restoration, connected to the story of global Earth repair and connected to the Earth Regeneration Fund. And also in May, Regenerate Cascadia is organizing their bioregional finance event, where they're going to be catalyzing their own funding ecosystem to the next level. And they're partnering with the design school to do this in various ways. And they're part of the Earth Regeneration Fund. So these are a few of the in-person gatherings that are already scheduled. But then there are a lot of other in-person gatherings that are either already scheduled or that are envisioned to be scheduled, such as, which we'll talk about soon, the confluences associated with R3.0's conference in September. So there'll be different kinds of in-person gatherings that are going to happen throughout this year. And what we want to do is initiate a weaving process among these stories, in-person gatherings, learning processes, and place-based efforts to basically have the Earth Regeneration Fund emerge within and across all of these processes simultaneously throughout the year. And here you can really see the Earth Regeneration Fund is stories, relationships, and contexts through this kind of pattern. So let's look at an example of this. The Bioregional Earth component of this is sharing the stories of funding ecosystems as they're taking form. Here are 3 examples. Progress with the Northern Andes Regeneration Fund, the work of the Barichara Regeneration Fund in our territorial foundation, Barichara Regenerativa, the work of Ogallala Life to create an Ogallala Regeneration Fund, and there are others. And the idea is that in these different place-based efforts, we're going to invite local teams to tell their stories through the newsletters and website of Bioregional Earth. And this becomes part of the way of promoting the Earth Regeneration Fund, telling stories of what it's doing, inviting people to donate and become partners, and so on, that part of the storytelling is coordinated through Bioregional Earth. Then there's Kinship Earth's Flow Fund. So Kinship Earth is a nonprofit organization in the United States, and they are already creating a support system for flow funding. What I mean by this is they are doing a study and gathering resources about all the different ways you can create a flow fund, how you work with lawyers to create the right structure, how you be sure that the IRS, if it's in the URS or wherever, however you do it, how do you create contracts? Basically, how could you create your own self-organized flow fund? Kinship Earth is gathering that information by working with other flow funds like Regenerosity and others who are out there. And they also have their own flow fund, and they have $500,000 they've already received, and they're already bringing that money to their own flow funders and have their own network of mentors and advisors. So for example, I am an advisor to the Kinship Earth Flow Fund. And so the Kinship Earth Flow Fund is its own flow fund, but they're also building a resource pool to help people set up their own flow funds. So we started talking about this back in early December of last year about doing flow funding for regenerating the Earth. And there's a webinar I gave here in the design school, because with the design school and the Earth Regeneration Fund, we're partnering with Kinship Earth to design a bioregional flow fund starter kit. So basically, this is what we're doing. We're trying to raise, we're just about to start, in the next couple of weeks we'll begin, to raise $150,000 that goes to Kinship Earth. Kinship Earth would receive and manage that money, and then that would seed 10 bioregional flow funds, which means each bioregional team that organizes itself according to the criteria of these starter kits can apply for and receive $15,000, which would be $5,000 to the team to pay them for managing the flow fund and $10,000 to practice flowing it into their local bioregion. And you can already see how the learning journey where we're helping people organize their bioregions. People could work toward organizing their bioregions sufficiently well to meet the criteria of the Bioregional Flow Fund Starter Kit. And this is how Kinship Earth, with the Earth Regeneration Fund, can partner with the learning journey of the design school. And this is one of the things that we want to do this year. And then there's Global Earth Repair Foundation. For those who don't know, Michael Skeeter Pilarski has been an organizer of transformational events and gatherings for 50 years. He was the co-organizer of the first ever permaculture convergence, the first barter fair, various things like this. He knows the founders of the bioregional movement and the founders of the permaculture movement because he's about 80 years old and been at this for 50 years. And the Global Earth Repair Foundation is about organizing for the repair of the earth or the restoration of the earth through ecosystem restoration. And here's their slogan from their 2019 conference: local earth repair action and global earth repair begins at home. Well, I'm part of the organizing team, as is Larry Green, who's on this call, and several other people. We are on an organizing team for a global earth repair convergence event that was scheduled for May of this year. And about a week ago, we made the decision to push it back to September. So there's going to be a physical gathering of people in Port Townsend, Washington, in Cascadia for a global earth repair. And they have an action plan for how to regenerate the earth through ecosystem restoration processes that they've been developing since the early 2000s, for about 20 years. And what we came to in our organizing team a week ago is that if we postpone the global event to September, then in May, we could initiate the creation of bioregional action plans, which is to say, what is your regenerative strategy for your bioregion that supports a planetary regeneration framework, which is how would you repair the Earth's climate through restoring regional water cycles, regional food sheds, regional ecosystems at a bioregional scale? And what is your bioregional action plan connected to that global action plan? And we're initiating that process right now. And then you bring in the bioregional flow funds from Kinship Earth. And these bioregional flow funds can be the starter kits to support the bioregional action plans, to help local teams to create them or to begin implementing them, depending on their stage of readiness. So for Global Earth Repair, our goal is to raise funds for the global convergence, which is going to cost a few $100,000, and also funding to convene bioregional planning processes, some of which is Kinship's Earth Bioregional Flow Funds, but some of it might be self-organized funding within different bioregions. Like Cascadia might be setting up a fund, the Forest of the Northeast, the Greater Takaranto bioregion, etc. And so this becomes part of the storytelling of the Earth Regeneration Fund. And then we have the design school and the learning journey. So the learning journey is a 6-month process to help local groups form that are doing bioregional organizing and to create their own design immersions, which means to create their own locally organized events in their own communities. And this is where we add R3.0. R3.0, which stands for Redesign, Resilience, and Regeneration, has been around since I think about 2010, for a long time. They've created blueprints for systems transformation and all kinds of awesome stuff, lots of knowledge commons. Last year, they hosted their conference in September around collapse resilience. This year, they're hosting dialogues throughout the year, starting next week, where they're inviting Carrie Crisp, Lila June, and Brandon Letzinger to talk about the history of bioregionalism. They're hosting dialogues about bioregional regeneration that build up between now and September of this year to talk about bioregional regeneration. And last year, they partnered with Neil and Ann, who are here on this call, from And Now What, to talk about collapse acceptance and how to translate these ideas into local contexts. And so these confluences were first prototyped by And Now What with Ann and Neil as part of R3.0's conference last year. And now they're integrating it into the process. And they want to help local groups to organize their own confluences. But guess what? They need money to do that. They need to raise funds to support these confluences. So the Earth Regeneration Fund can do some of the storytelling and draw attention to what R3.0 is doing with these confluences as part of this larger network of storytelling to bring the funding that's needed for the confluences. And so Penny and I have a call scheduled, or actually we're trying to schedule a call with Bill and Ralph of R3.0 to get on the same page about how we set up that agreement between our efforts so the design school and R3.0 can partner to raise funding for the confluences. And you can see that there's a mix of relationships among several of us on this call that are connected to that work. And so you're already part of the Earth Regeneration Fund if we choose to do this. And now, taking that big mess of stuff together, let me summarize it. So the strategic vision for 2025 can be summarized like this.
Hey, I've got a bad hip, so I'm not going to offer to help.
Oh,
I'm
Peter,
not
could you,
tracing.
thank you. And he's just muted Peter, sorry. So first you can see that one of our strategic focus areas is to create an ecosystem of stories that reinforce each other, that build a kind of positive echo chamber, that create momentum and coherence, that create inspiration and engagement, and attract partners and funders. So this is a big part of the Earth Regeneration Fund, is to create an ecosystem of stories. Second is to catalyze local organizing in diverse forms. So this can be global earth repair, local events. This can be permaculture convergences. This can be design immersions connected with the learning journey. This can be confluences connected with R3.0 or other kinds of organizing. We want to catalyze them through the storytelling and through the fundraising that we're doing so that a network of bioregions is self-organizing around these patterns. We want to cultivate financial flows as mycelial networks through the bioregional flow funds, through the bioregional action plans for earth repair, through the learning journey, through the R3.0 dialogues, etc. Beyond this, to the BioFi community of practice, to the bioregional weaving labs in Europe, to other groups. We want to cultivate financial flows that create mycelial networks of bioregional organizing, and using the Kinship Earth Bioregional Flow Fund starter kits as one of the mechanisms, but only one of the mechanisms for doing that. And then we want to connect all of this to planetary frameworks of Earth regeneration. And the first one for us is the Global Earth Repair Action Plan. But another one that isn't mentioned in the presentation is my book, The Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth, which is a planetary framework that the design school is organized around. But it's to say we want to help the bioregional organizing to connect to planetary frameworks of Earth regeneration. And we want to scaffold all of this with the rhythm and the structure of the learning journey as it's connected to the design school for the sake of coherence across these diverse networks. So that's why the learning journey becomes a kind of rhythm and cadence for the design immersions within the design school, but that it's connected to all of these other activities through those rhythms as a kind of scaffolding. And so that's the vision for the Earth Regeneration Fund: ecosystem of stories, catalyze diverse forms of local organizing, to cultivate financial flows into and across ecosystems of action, to connect it to planetary frameworks, and to scaffold with the learning journey in the design school. For all of that to happen, we need to evolve this regenerative finance lab that's in the design school. And as we mentioned in our vision for 2025, that between January and March, we would be transitioning some of the existing activities. And so we want to initiate a similar pattern in the Regenerative Finance Lab to what is currently happening in the Bioregional Leaders Guild. Those of you who are in this Leaders Guild will know that Penny and I co-hosted a session about a week and a half ago where we explored with the participants that there were different focus areas and workflows that the Bioregional Leaders Guild can reorganize itself into. Similarly, we want to explore the emergent workflows from what's presented here today. How can the Regenerative Finance Lab help create flow funds with Kinship Earth? How can we create workflow and work groups around global earth repair and bioregional action plans? How can we create workflows for funding of confluences and community dialogues with R3.0? and so on. So how can we imagine and envision the finance lab becoming practical workflows around the opportunities that are emerging this year? And that means we can weave the regenerative finance lab with the learning journey as it unfolds because of its rhythm and support structures. And as we do that, we can link the design school funds with immersions, because one of the things that's already happening is members of the design school pay a membership due of $5 a month or $49 a year. Some people pay into a scholarship fund for other members, and some people donate money into the design school fund. And we're already using some of that money to help cover transportation costs for people in the design school to come to the Barichara immersion. So we're imagining that the design school funds will support this kickstarting of some of the immersions for members of the design school. And in that way, it's connected to the Earth Regeneration Fund as well. And we'll be exploring how to do that throughout the year. So that's it. That's the strategic vision for the Earth Regeneration Fund in 2025. And so you can see it's very concrete, it's very ambitious, but each of the elements of it is completely doable. Like raising $150,000 for Kinship Earth, that sounds doable. Working with R 3.0 to create a funding proposal and mobilizing resources for the confluences, that seems doable. Global Earth Repair with its network of partners and relationships is already fundraising for its conference. But if we connect it to this way of thinking, then it can help to fund these bioregional action plans, which are connected to things like the carrying capacity conversations happening here in the design school, the processes around the mimetic activation platform, and so on. So that's what I wanted to present to you. And what I want to explore now is, how can we actually do this? Because obviously, this one human being is not doing this. I am weaving narratives right now. I am taking the stories that other people are holding, and I'm bringing those stories into confluences with each other. And if you all haven't seen it, it's kind of amazing what happened when we lit a fire under Skeeter Pilarski's butt. In the last week and a half, Larry's been watching this happen. How Skeeter's like all in on this. And that man is a superpower organizer. And so in a similar way, there are a lot of people doing this work in the web of relationships now. It's the coherence of the stories is what matters. So what I would love to do is open this up for questions, comments, and elaboration on the different elements. And also, where do we want to go from here? Because the design school is a space in which we can hold some of these processes to support some of this work. I'm not trying to put it all in the design school. I'm just saying the design school has scaffolding. It can help. How can it help is one of our questions. So I'd love to open up for questions and comments. Bill, come on in. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And in particular, thank you for spotlighting the work that we're doing in a collaborative way with the bioregioning movement globally, including very much so with the design school. I wanted to preface what I say just with a kind of a realization that I made. So in September at the gathering in the greater Takaranto bioregion, where the Earth Regeneration Fund was launched, at first I didn't quite wrap my head around it, but what really resonated and continues to deepen in resonation is resonating is the idea of the Earth Regeneration Fund as not just a pool of financial resources, but as a mechanism for storytelling and narrative transmission, and drawing on your deep history, Joe, of the value of cognitive framing in moving ideas forward into action. So I just wanted to sort of preface with that, and as I was, as I saw the announcement about this session, one of the things I realized is that we at R3.0 are organizing these, or not, we're not organizing, we are inviting bioregions to autonomously and through their own agency organize confluences that they can do however they want. But what we're inviting is that they do it in conjunction or in parallel to the R3.0 conference. that conference is this year, for the first time, we're focusing only on one topic. We've usually had a spread of topics. This year, it's just on bioregioning. And therefore, it's a great sort of companion to what bioregions can do in their own gatherings, where they also, I imagine, would talk about, governance work or knowledge building, skill building, et cetera. And so we are already making a commitment to financially supporting those confluences, as well as supporting the work that it takes to create infrastructure for that. So, for example, we're having calls with Anne and Neil to build on the prototype and piloting that they did last year. And so it just struck me that the fundraising necessary for these confluences could happen under the umbrella of the Earth Regeneration Fund, whether that means that it's literal finances that flow through the design school or through your fiscal sponsorship, or whether it flows through our 3.0 and our fiscal sponsorship with Regen Foundation, et cetera. That in some ways is less relevant than the flowing through of a story around this flowing together confluence. And so when I just mentioned this to Joe and Penny, they both were open to exploring this, and then I asked if this is something we could talk about on the call today. So it's really an emergent thing. I guess I'll end with two things. One is the future vision of this, or maybe three things. One is that we imagine the confluences primarily being just directly in temporal relationship to the conference. However, I've already started having conversations about confluences actually being elongated temporally. So starting as early as April, I'm in conversation with Susanna Cho, who organized the UN gathering on bioregioning in December. She and I together are organizing an event at the Foundation House in Greenwich around food and fiber systems and an eco-based economy. And she said, I'd like that to be a confluence. And at first I was like, wait, no, that doesn't make sense. But then I was like, why not? It just, we can take the temporal, exactly, Joe. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. And I'm also in conversation about Benjamin Life about doing a hackathon on the data side of the bioregional carrying capacity work. And that could potentially be a confluence in the sense that it's moving forward a shared agenda. So that's one of the things I wanted to mention, is sort of take it. The primary focus is in a synchronous, in September, but it can also elongate. On the other side of the conference, we're going to have the 2 days of the conference that the content will be focused around. And then the third day, the 11th of September, we will be inviting all of the confluences to gather together in a day-long meeting to share learnings and share experiences from amongst one another. And then thereafter, on a monthly basis, we will be holding confluence debrief calls on a continental basis. So 5 of those in the months that follow. We're doing that, and this is my final point, or actually this is part of it, and I do have one point of tying this into the learning journey. All of this is meant to set seeds for confluences, setting foundations for congressing. So revitalizing the practice that was in the bioregional world from 1980s, arguably starting in 1976 with Peter Berg's ambling towards a continental Congress, through 2009 and the last Continental Congress at the farm. Although you could say that Oak the Ozark area community congresses are still continuing this, but revitalizing this with the confluences really happening in this year. Brandon and I were riffing about this, that if those are this year, then bioregional scale congresses would probably emerge around the 2026 range. Continental scale congresses would probably emerge in the 2027 range, maybe before that. BioFi is doing some coordinating around a North American one. But then 2028 for a planetary bioregional congress. So I just wanted to share how this confluencing is part of a broader set of thinking. The last thing I'll say is just Ralph isn't able to be here today. He is sick, unfortunately. So I just shot him a picture of the slide that you presented, Joe, and he wrote back just to put out there an idea of the learning journey itself, integrating the confluencing, preparation for confluencing into it. So that's just a whispering in your ear about something that could be part of it. So I've talked for a long time. I apologize for that, but there's, as you can see, sort of a lot of moving parts to this. So there we have it.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I'll make one comment and then pass to Ann and Neil, which is, I feel like one of the ways we can decolonize our minds is to remember that organizations and corporations are just tools. So the Earth Regeneration Fund, sure, money can go to Possible Planet, our fiscal sponsor, or to another organization we create. But it could also go to Regen Foundation. It could also go to Kinship Earth. Like, it goes through our relationships. And the organizations are bank accounts and contracts. And we do those correctly, we do those legally, but like, I'm not trying to get money to go through my organization. I want the money to go to the web, to where it needs to be managed with the principle of subsidiarity, which is the most close to the decision that needs to be made, is where the power should be. So if the money is about bioregional flow funds, it should go to Kinship Earth. If it's for confluences and Earth 3.0 is sponsored by Regen Foundation, then it goes to Regen Foundation. I'm not trying to bring the money through the, quote, Earth Regeneration Fund organization. And that distinction is really important because it's a dynamic way of relating. So I just want to name that as very important in the fluidity of all this. And then over to Ann and Neil.
Thanks, Joe. Love your vision and love Bill's conversation there. A couple of issues here, Bill, building on what you did last year and the confluence that we ran in Flanders, which was more around collapse aware and the depth of collapse acceptance, which will influence every decision made in every bioregion. And the final day of when you had the partner day, the third day of the conference, as you said it here, is the day when we do the integration. And so depending on the depth that we go into with confluences, and that will depend on each autonomous group deciding what level of depth that we want to go into our future design responses, we will probably need an integration day depending on the depth of the content which is coming through the speakers. And so part of the bioregional learning journey that we're talking about here is how do we build the capability and maturity and capacity of individuals that might be holding confluences to hold the potential grief and or other things that come up during that process and integrate it depending on the level of depth that they want to go to. So that ties in then with catalyzing local organizing in diverse forms across a network of bioregions, which is more of an interstitial process, right, rather than individual group. And the supporting learning journey elements of that would require elements of human system dynamics, how to handle grief, how to handle different levels of collapse acceptance and awareness, building that in, of course, to ultimately what we're doing here is going beyond confluences and beyond conferences. It's actually, I presume, tell me if I'm wrong, having collapse accepting ecosystems of players in every bioregion that are doing the anticipatory whole systems design on behalf of that bioregion. And that is a level of systems leadership which is above individual organizational process. And so it needs to mutually recognize the players in that process. And this is the challenge that we've had in terms of bringing our insights into the group, is that we don't have the deep roots on the ground here in our specific area of Belgium to say, hey, fund us to do this. We've got gifts that could potentially be distributed in multiple places as a lead up to and multiple stepping stones between here and confluence/conference. And how do we actually get to that mechanism where we can be supported to bring our gifts in ways that mutually support multiple regions and multiple confluences at the levels of depth to which they can go, and then have multiple alternative stories about the levels they've gone to be referred to and passed along, as I know that Joe can do beautifully, in terms of these guys are just starting out, but these guys have gone a bit deeper, or these guys have gone a bit further. And by the way, when you get to here, you're going to hit a roadblock, or when you get to there, you're going to need some further funding. You know, we've done a fair bit of that sort of thinking, but we don't have the on the ground roots. So that think, link, fund, do element, and getting that torus flowing, I think is what I can see it in your model here, Joe. I love the way that you've incorporated those elements of us and R3.0 into that. And we're continuing this conversation with R3.0 next week. So I'm aware that there's still some bits in motion here. I wouldn't want to be cemented into a position where we can't actually allow the room for the integration that's going to be required to deeply grok the enormity and the design challenge.
Yeah, and Neil, I would just quickly say that this is the power of shared narrative, is if you were to try and do what you just said without our 3.0 having a process that they're already convening, and without the design school having a process that's convening, you would just be like drawing diagrams, which your diagrams are beautiful, but we know that we need this to be interweaving with real processes, real
Yes.
community processes. And that's where the scaffolding and the narratives come together so powerfully. So that's part of the magic of this. Yeah.
Just to reflect that back the other way, that's actually also gone the other way, with R3.0 inviting us to present the Collapse roller coaster several years ago, with us working with Equinox Collective, who actually came up with the idea of the confluence because of that connection, and that we brought together in a confluence to actually deliberately design it in this way to bring it back together again. So we are mutual partners in this play with different skills and different levels of skills, and we have to have mutual respect for the respective skills that we're bringing together. And that's actually the shared narrative, is how do I respect the other storytellers in the room?
Yeah, and so onward we go. We'll keep refining and keep clarifying and really honoring the point you made, that the idea is not that anything is concrete right now. It's that there are flows and we have intentionality. And if we make that intentionality conscious, collectively in a shared way, then we can guide it toward confluences of stories. So that's part of what is happening here. Thank you for that, Neil. Thanks, Belle, and Annalika, over to you.
Thank you, Joe. It's just wonderful how these bigger visions are coming together. And I would like to add another element to it as regards Europe, because it's my sense that Europe is different from the United States, from the regions at the other side of the ocean. And I see a distinct function for a continental Europe for Bioregional Europe conference as a way of activating things in Europe, and also for a way to make connections with, for instance, bioregional weaving labs, and like get the actual working together off the ground instead of competing or just remaining doing your own thing. And in that respect, I would like maybe to have the time frame speed it up a little bit, because my sentence, if we're going to do that in 26, 27, that's too late. I really think that this is the given the huge diversity and everything that's already going on, I think Bioregional Europe conference is one movement of cultivating and confluence. So I'm willing to have conversations separate from this call on that, just to brainstorm, to see if others see or I see if we're missing something. Yeah, I would like to have the conversation, because bioregional work is something that I want to work on.
Yeah, Annalika, there at the end, you were a little bit away from the speaker, I think. I was able to follow it, but But I don't know that everyone was able to. So I'll just summarize the sentiment, because I think the sentiment is very clear, which is that there is a time frame in which a continental or a Europe scale of coherence is needed,
Disconnected. Ready to pair.
and that if we wait, if that isn't included in the story, in this weaving of stories, that it basically would miss its coherence. That'd be part of what Annalika was saying. There's more to it than that. And one thing I can say in response is, I know that Ralph from Earth 3.0 is very interested in exactly this as well. And I think you may already be talking with him. But if you're not, I would just say,
I am.
Ralph is on it. So you guys should be on it
I
together.
am.
Excellent. And the other
Actually,
is,
I brought this to Ralph.
okay, yeah, I just knew that there was a synergy there of interest. And the other is Karen Mueller from Bioregional Weaving Labs reached out to me this week to ask me to speak at the Bioregional Hope event next Monday, where they're presenting the film series of the 7 projects in bioregional projects that are happening in Europe. And I'm going to speak about this beyond nation states, where do we go? And also about the learning journey as a kind of coherence and scaffolding. And these are just tiny nudges in the direction of us moving toward the kind of collaboration that you're naming, which I think, as you say, we need to assert the need for it, as you just did. We need to assert the need for this coherence this year, which I agree.
Yes, yes. And I would love to see a Bioregional Europe conference online to activate. If I may just add that to how you summarized what I said. I really think that a conference like that, organized by multiple people, is the easiest way to further activate in Europe.
So the question then just becomes, oh, go ahead, Bill. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I just, so Annalika, I totally support that. So the timeline that I laid out before is totally provisional. It was sort of, off the cuff that Brandon and I riffed on together. So the idea of congresses or conferences happening before that, I'm like you, way on board with that.
That's great to hear. And I know Ralph, when I brought this to him, we visited live. I visited him at his home. And when I brought this to him, he saw the possibilities. So I'm really happy that I can work with him on this.
Yeah, thank you for that, Annalika. It's exactly this kind of synergy in time, where the time synchronization is what matters. And so, so I think it's really important, the sense making that you just brought in. So I guess my question for this group is, it's almost like a provocation in a way for some of you. Some of you have already been thoroughly provoked and know where you're going, and like Annalika knows what she's working on and Bill knows what he's working on and so on. But some of you may be sitting in this feeling like, oh, there's something for me to do, but I don't know what it is yet. I better figure it out. Or there's something I'm already doing. I need to meditate on it. And I don't know the answer in this moment. But the provocation is, as Los Angeles burns to the ground, as the next Valencia, Spain happens, as the next, this stuff is just accelerating. As that stuff happens, as those breakdowns happen, how can we leverage these stories as powerfully as possible? That's like, there's a real window of time here for this. So just naming that as part of the context. So that like Asheville, Carolina is organizing bioregionally, and I think LA will too. I think LA will after this. Is Valencia? I don't know. Who else? Where are they? How can they? If they're not, what can we learn, etc. These are provocations. They're provocations because this is the time to be weaving these kinds of stories. And so, and as Trump takes office next Monday, and the United States says, seals the coffin on any pretense of it hasn't been a democracy for a long time, for anyone who's wondering. It's been a plutocracy for decades. But it can't even pretend to be a democracy anymore. Like you can't say that with a straight face and have people believe you, except for the most indoctrinated people. And you're not going to convince them of anything anyway. But it's like, so these things are happening. What do we do? What do we do? And so that's my provocation for us, is this kind of story weaving invites us all to tell the stories together. to tell the stories together as a planet, not together as a group. And so it's in that way that the timing matters. So Steve, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think, partially in response to maybe that provocation, but I was just going to try and this is the dialogue I've been trying to set up with you, but is to weave the relationship between what unfolded during the 4-part series that we did, earlier in the lab, with this 2025 vision. And I'm seeing a lot of connections, but I just want to, I'll check that we're seeing the same connections, right? So one of the things that struck me today, however, is the way that the different terminology can sometimes create silos that aren't there, or create divisions that aren't really there, right? So what I see, what Wendy McLean and Vincent Arena and I are trying to do right now is to serve the process of bringing expression, visibility, and coherence across this ecosystem of stories, right? So there's the term bioregional mapping, but it's hard to understand. That has so many definitions, it's almost meaningless on its own, right? So sometimes it's pigeonholed. Oh, that's bioregional mapping. That's somehow other than this thing. But I'm proposing reframing the way we're thinking about it. At least is bringing expression, helping people tell their stories, bringing visibility, that is helping people share their stories, and bringing coherence of weaving connections across these stories. That's really what we're trying to do with the mapping exercises that we're trying to support, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to share that touch point to see if it resonates and as an invitation.
Yeah, I think just I'll say something brief and then we can go over to Carrie. That something I learned from doing memetics work after having done framing work and before really doing a deep dive into cultural evolution and getting a holistic understanding of the scientific research in cultural evolution. So I had this period of time, some of that overlapping with your history, Steve, and the things you've studied, like what is a memeplex and these kinds of things. And when you get to the level of a discourse, where the discourse is a collection of actors and narratives and symbols and processes and gestures and like basically it's a system of meaning, a system of semantics that is self-perpetuating as a collection, so that you have ideas that support each other, ideas that undermine each other, ideas that strengthen or weaken each other, and so on. And what we need is that way of building coherence across our stories and actions that are mimetic, that are operating at the level of meaning making. And so, which is exactly what you're saying. It's exactly what you're saying. So that's my way of saying yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
that's what we need.
In a concrete way, if I could just follow up briefly.
Yeah.
So, we offered a survey at the end of the 4-part series, and we got good response from that. So people expressed an interest in either helping contribute to the shaping the bioregional mapping templates. In other words, the set of questions that any bioregional mapping effort should find useful in helping them figure out what is it we're trying to do here, who are the stakeholders, what are the objectives, and so forth. So there's some people who wanted to help shape the template. There's other people that said, hey, we're interested in doing a project, right? So I want to connect those efforts. I mean, we're talking all the same people here, right? So I'm just trying to connect those conversations and try and make sure that we're doing one thing rather than, unless there's a good reason to do it 2 different ways, let's start under the assumption that we can do it together, right? So not sure how much sense that made, but what I'm making is a plea for coherence of the efforts themselves, and I want to get coherence with you. So we've refrained from setting up much in the way of follow-up meetings with the people that responded to the survey, because I wanted to make sure that what we're doing is not seen as separate from what the larger vision in 2025 is for the design school and the other efforts you talked about. So that's the reason for the conversation that I've been trying to set up with you and Penny. it's also, we're setting up meetings with Brandon and Claire and Bill and others. There's a whole list of people. I won't try and go through them here, but just want to make sure we'll bring coherence to that process.
Yeah, I hope that the presentation today and the Design School Vision video are two parts of that, bringing clarity to what's happening in the field around us as it relates to sort of the locus of action Penny and I are in, because there are plenty of things that we're not touching and talking about because they're not in our locus of action. But the coherence is like it's becoming more clear on a weekly basis right now.
Yeah, one
That's
thing
what I
that
see.
would help me is if you could tie it back to some of the language used in the past, like how does the ecosystem of stories relate to the bioregional knowledge commons or
Yeah.
to bioregional mapping or bioregional learning centers, right? Those were prominent terms last year. I think they're still active this year, but weaving those connections would be helpful. How do you see the ecosystem of stories in relationship to the knowledge commons, the mapping efforts, bioregional learning centers, for example?
Yeah, great. Onward we go. Let's keep doing that. Thank you, Steve. And apologies that Penny and I have had such a crazy schedule.
No worries.
We're working on it, doing our
Yeah.
best.
Yeah, me too. I am.
Yeah,
No worries.
we'll get there. Carrie, over to you.
Thank you. This is really exciting, and I love the weaving that's already happening. And as I saw the schedule for what's happening this year, alongside, what Art 3.0 is doing, I started to pencil out a map for what we can potentially bring to life in Los Angeles. And I think some of you know that, I started a conversation, ironically, at in the last quarter of last year with a group of folks who are coming around a bioregioning effort. And, of course, not anticipating what we'd be facing now. So, I mean, I'm just trying to think through how best to both serve our bioregion, and serve the collective, right? And I mean, it seems like the timing seems just right in many ways. But where I think where I feel, I guess there's a question for me of how best to do that in this moment, because, for example, to your point about, is bioregional regeneration going to be the response from our bioregion to this? That's not what I'm seeing yet. I'm seeing, and I feel quite powerless, candidly, in this moment against the sort of the impulse to rebuild, without surfacing these questions. And I have not yet contributed to the online conversation because I've been trying to be respectful of what continues to happen in our context. And so I'm just balancing trying to be respectful, but also trying to engage and trying to get ahead of the potential enormous energy, power, and money that is going to flow that is already flowing into the region, and trying to figure out how to potentially redirect some of that. But so I guess I need support and help in thinking through how to be extremely strategic in this moment. And maybe that help can come from the design school. Maybe I need to just go ahead and set up a bioregional. I know there's all the different bioregions have their conversations. So maybe now it's time for that. I don't know. Just articulating my own conflictedness around really wanting to move forward, but also wanting to do it in the most respectful way. And so I think I need support in that. I think that's what I'm coming to. And I wonder also, just in starting to craft the narrative publicly, when is the right time, and how do I start to tell this story that you've been sharing with us over these last many months, including today? What's the right way to position it in this context?
Two things were just coming up for me as you were talking. One was I started thinking of people in the design school that you could gather together for a specific conversation, which is there are members of the design school who live in places that have gone through disaster and collapse. like what Elias has gone through with the violence that's happening in his part of the world, what Salvador has been connected with the flooding in Spain, what Holly McCann and Tiffany Hart are working on in Asheville, Carolina. And there are probably others. Those are just a few people that immediately came to mind, that if there was a session to talk about how do we cultivate resilience in response to disaster based on the real world experiences of what's been happening recently, not in a theoretical sense, what's been happening recently, and then shape that into like what's happened in Asheville, North Carolina has been probably the most proactive and productive in this sense. So, but then you look at the ones that were less and just have a conversation together about what are the differences and what can we learn and how can that inform how you would enter into the living context of LA right now and of Southern California with the
Right.
sensitivity to death and destruction and grieving and loss and all of that. That just to invite that in the school, it's almost like having a panel discussion plus a work group. I don't know what form. It could be really easy to just invite. You know, I just named a few people that I know have direct knowledge of this, of their own very different experiences in this. That was one thing. And then the other thing was Natalia Fleming has been doing a really powerful series on LinkedIn in the last week about why the water cycle and the Santa Ana winds are the way they are with the solar farms over in the desert east of the mountains. And if you hadn't dried out your landscape, you wouldn't have the kinds of fires you're having right now. And that the energy efficiency in solar panels in the Mojave Desert are a big part of why LA is burning to the ground because of the regional water cycle. And that almost no one knows hydrology and water cycles, and she's an expert in it. So she's been producing some really powerful content on LinkedIn the last few days about the localized heating of the Mojave with these solar panels and the intensification of drying out of the air as that hot, dry air comes dropping down into the bowl of LA. And you can just see that parallel into other dryland ecosystems. So, and she's very active in Ecosystem Restoration Alliance, which is very active with Global Earth Repair. So when we're talking about these ecosystem restoration people, there's a whole meshwork of expertise that most of us don't know about. World-class expertise like Natalia Fleming, who know how to restore a water cycle at a regional scale. They know. They've done the computer simulations. They've done the GIS mapping, like all of it. They know. But they're not being heard because the story is carbon offsets and carbon markets. And
Right.
so it's just recognizing that shift of narrative is so important in this. But that's where you could bring together the permaculture convergences, the ecosystem restoration people. And I just know Natalia Fleming specifically looking at LA right now and the Santa Ana winds as a regional dynamic. But those are two things that came to mind for me that like if you wanted to just host a gathering in the design school of resilience and disaster, help us in LA and just reach out to specific people I named and ask them to come, find a time that works for them. I think it'd be a kick-ass session to record and you'd get some really good ideas for what to do moving forward. So,
Done. Thank you. I just looked up Natalia and I can't seem to find her on LinkedIn. So
or maybe she's Natalie Fleming. Let me see. I'll just get her link for you real quick.
Okay. Thank you so much, Joe.
And
Okay.
someone else
I'm on
can
it. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Natalie Fleming. Sorry, I said it wrong, but I'll just give you her link here. She's awesome. She's been doing regional climate change work for a while. Unless someone else beat me to it. There we go. Yeah, Elias got her for us. She's awesome. You'll love her. And there are others like her out there. So Anne and Neil, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. Carrie, I just wanted with the utmost respect to respond to your questions, which is basically, and now what? Right? Now that this has happened, and now what? And so very much the focus of our work is how do we anticipate exactly what LA has just gone through and do the design responses and the connections in advance of that. So that's part of the anticipatory design requirement that needs to go into the depth of integration, that needs to go into the confluences and other things, right? And so if we're not thinking about that can happen, then we have grave difficulty coping with it once it has happened. I see that Salva is nodding as well, right? We currently have the organizational capacity, self-organizational capacity, because it hasn't yet happened to most of us. And yet once it's happened, the existing system will try and build back in the same places with the same property system, with the same economic system, and argue and basically we'll blame the people that we can get away with blaming. We'll shoot the messengers that tried to warn us about it, and we'll pretend that it's not going to happen again, because otherwise that'll challenge property values. So there's those sorts of dynamics we're going to have to deal with. We have to get ahead of that for other places, but I'd love to be involved in the conversation that you want to have with the other players together. How do we hold space for those that have been now through this? And how do we hold space for those that haven't yet, but know they will? Because that's actually collapse acceptance. And that's the design gem, the germ of the idea for what depth of design do we have to go next? What happens next? What type of boat do I have to build to cope with the size of waves I'm going to encounter? And if we haven't thought about the size of the waves, then we haven't really integrated that, we're not going to get design responses. What does that look like at the organizational level? That's going to be very messy, given the number of players involved in Los Angeles and what's happening. What Joe's talked to is some of the design responses in terms of what we would love to be able to do if we were actually respecting the water cycle. We're also going to have to work with how do we influence those that actually are the ones that have any control over the water cycles. And that's the property players and the other infrastructure providers. So that's the challenges we're trying to hold in this space. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Neil and Carrie, for making it real. This is real. And Salvador, please keep it real. I know you will.
I agree completely with what Nate just said. And I just wanted to say how important it is, the storytelling, the narrative. Because now what we are living here, we are 4 or 5 crazy men and women who has a narrative about what happened will happen again if we do nothing to change things and it's important this view about to change the way we design our way of living, the places we live, etc., etc. And at the same time, it's important to change the way we relate with the soil and we relate with the watersheds, to change, because it was crazy. It was unbelievable what happened here. It's not first time that we have the floods here in Valencia. Every, I don't know, 50, 70 years we have the floods. It's okay. But the crazy quantity of water that it's something that it's unbelievable. And what we are doing, these 3 or 4 crazy men like me, who has a different narrative, we are using every opportunity that we have to put a different narrative into the table and to go out of the carbon solution, because we have clear that it's not the only point we have to work with. Of course, it's important, but there are many other places where to go, and the average person here, they are looking TV again. They are just waiting to receive the money to buy a new car, and this is the main thinking. But now, going back to Angelique, now is the moment to make the change. Now is the moment. If we wait more time, we will lose the window, opportunity window. Now is the moment, and that's why I'm listening very attentively all what you are doing, and I'm deep convinced the importance of the narrative, of the storytelling. We need stories. We need to engage the people, because it's real. It's unbelievable the quantity of money that is over there. It's unbelievable. We see it there, because when the flood happened, the money starts raining here, money and money and money and money, and now suddenly, boom, everything disappeared. But the money is there. So we need the narrative. We need to put on the table the reality, what we want to change, how we want to transform, and that we want to do it in an horizontal way. It's That's what I want to say. We need to change the narrative, because if we don't change the narrative, this will happen again, and it's too hard to live this. It's something too hard for the people to live this. That's what I want to say.
Gracias, Salva, gracias. I just wanted to name that one of the things that Penny and I did during our bioregional activation tours, and we were asked by local people to do this, is we would tell the story of what we're doing in Barichara to show that there's a different way. And so I would tell the story of the children going out to restore a watershed, and you could watch people like Andrew and David and the GTB, you would see like, oh, maybe we could be doing that here. And it's like, we did the same thing in the Colorado Basin. We did the same thing in Cascadia. And so I use the story of Barichara because it's the story I can tell. It's the story of what I'm doing. And I can speak from my own direct experience about it. And I can answer any question that comes because I know what I'm doing. It's what I'm doing. But if I didn't have, like if I had done those bioregional activations while I was living in Seattle and not doing this, like what, I would just be some schmo who sounds smart, right? I'd be another person who seems to have good ideas. But when someone looks and says, wait, is that your kid playing with those kids in that different way of educating children? I want that for my kid. So this is why bioregional learning exchange, the exchange between the bioregions, is the core focus of the design school. Is we need to show each other's bioregions what we're doing, because each other's bioregions need those stories. You need stories from other bioregions, and other bioregions need your stories. Because if you try and convince people with what you're doing, you're not going to get very far. That's already happening. But if you come in with really powerful stories from other places, it's just amazing how significant that turns out to be. And so having the Earth Regeneration Fund focus on telling the stories of what's happening in different bioregions is a strategy of storytelling. It's a narrative strategy that it's easy to not notice how big of a deal it is. It's easy to not realize how, like if I had been coming to the GTB for the last 2 years without telling the story of Barichara, the GTB work would be in a very different place today. It wouldn't have gotten nearly as far. And it's not because Barichara is so important by itself. It's because we're in a partnership of learning exchanges. If you want to learn more, go visit Barichara, just as an example. Like, if you want to learn more, go visit those people. And so we need these stories that invite us into relationship. And that's why, for me, the Earth Regeneration Fund is about stories and relationships. And that's why money comes, if it comes at all. Like, where would the money go and with whom, right? Yes, Saba, please.
This morning here we received the visit of a woman from Bolivia. Is from the group of, it's a NGO, name is Tedesco. They are working with the watershed in the area of Cochabamba, Mizque, all these things. And he was talking about bioregions without knowing it, but it was fantastic. And she arrived to us to see what we are doing with the organic waste, because this is something that I'm proud of, to have been capable to build such a system, local system of composting of the organic waste. And I already been in Bolivia in Mizque to make some workshops there about this, and this made me allow me to talk. When talking about the flood, I feel that I have the right to talk. I have the right to talk. And sometimes when I listen some people who is just watching TV and giving like to Facebook and so on, and giving their opinion, okay, everyone can give his or her opinion, but we need to be involved to be able to have a powerful story, a powerful talk. And this I made me feel that they have the right to say what I'm thinking, and maybe I'm wrong, but I have a clear vision of what I have to do. That's why I'm going to Barichara, because I need to grow up to open my vision. I need to open my mind. I'm not still ready to go for such a a big project. So I need to go to Barichara in this.
Thank you, Sala. So what I'd like to say is a way of like bringing this conversation to a close today so that the next steps can emerge. So I don't think we need next steps right now. What we need is this potentiated energy of feeling about what is emerging so each of us can find our way into it. So Carrie, we've been talking with you, Carrie, about like, how do I be involved? And you have ideas and you're not sure and you go back and forth. And then all of a sudden you're in the middle of the hot seat, literally and figuratively in Los Angeles. And you're like, well, now I have to act because I'm in a place of responsibility because I'm responsible to my place. That's what I have responsibility because I'm beholden to this place. And so there's this way in which we are each living into the stories in different ways. And by the way, part of the reason Global Earth Repair is being postponed is because there's a financial crisis with Fort Worden State Park, which is the place that the event is being convened. And it's working itself out and it's going to be okay on the other side. But the crisis opened the space for this much more beautiful model to come into being. And I know Larry is trying to build a bioregional learning center at Fort Worden State Park. And so these processes are all connected, right? They're all connected. And what we need is the power of storytelling together. So if I'm telling a story, it's easier for Ann and Neil to have a place to be in the larger narrative. And if Bill and Ralph are telling a story, it's easier for me to be in that place. You know, like we come into each other's stories through the coherence of the stories. That's the real insight in this. And that the Earth Regeneration Fund is the stories of us doing that that invite the financial partners, the ones who are aligned with integrity and ethics for what needs to happen, and which is a process of making the story visible to networks beyond our own. Because if I already knew the people that were going to fund my work in Barichara, I wouldn't need to go and look for funding. But as I tell stories out into the world, those people arrive and want to help. And some of them, what can I do? Oh, you could give money. Because for some people, that's what they can do. And so there are ways that this synergy emerges through the relationships themselves. And you just need to be clear enough and ready enough to say what you need in your own story as part of the unfolding stories. So that when you ask for what you need, someone could give it because it's clear enough. And that's organizing work. You know, that's organizing work. So the learning journey about organizing your bioregion is going to help with that. It's going to be one of the elements that flows throughout the year as scaffolding. But all of these other processes are also scaffolding. It's we scaffold our way into being together by scaffolding each other. That's how we build movements. And so that's the idea of the Earth Regeneration Fund. And so my invitation for the next step is for you to just meditate on what is your part in this? And what are you going to help with next? Are you going to help us build the Kinship Earth Flow Fund model or raise money for it? Are you going to help with the interstitial space that Neil was speaking to? Are you going to get involved in the confluences with Bill and Ralph? Are you going to help Annalika organize a Continental Congress, Continental Conference for Europe? Are you going to, etc.? Because we're each stepping into our stories as part of these big stories. And so, so that's the invitation for the next step. And now you have a better picture of this. I'm going to make the recording of this available for us to share. So you can share this recording with others to help us to attract the partnerships and the alignment that we need outside of the design school. And onward we go. So thank you everyone for this amazing conversation. It's been so powerful. And now I'm looking forward to living it out with you in the next year and beyond. So thank you, everyone.